I cannot clearly remember when or where I first encountered Tabitha. Time has blurred those early memories, but I believe we met in a quiet corner of old London. She spoke of belonging to an ancient family, yet I never learned her surname. She became my friend, my intellectual companion, and eventually my wife. What I recall vividly is Tabitha herself. She was tall and graceful, though she grew thinner as time passed. Her presence was so quiet that I often only knew she had entered the room when I heard her gentle voice or felt her hand on my shoulder. Her skin was pale as moonlight, her hair thick and brown. When she smiled, the world seemed to disappear. But it was her eyes that haunted me. They were unusually large, brown and surrounded by dark lashes, and when she grew excited, they resembled a cat's eyes. There was something mysterious in her gaze that I could never quite grasp. No matter how many sleepless nights I spent trying to understand it. Tabitha possessed a brilliant mind. She mastered Greek, Persian, and countless other languages flawlessly. Her knowledge of history and mathematics was extraordinary. In our early marriage, she became my partner in scholarly work. We studied together, and I relied on her wisdom completely. Without her, I felt helpless and lost. Then illness came. Tabitha grew weak, her weight dropping, her skin becoming almost transparent. When I realized death was approaching, despair overwhelmed me. She fought with fierce determination to survive. Her love for me became painfully clear in those final days. She gripped my hands and spoke of her devotion, fighting death with every breath. On her last night, she rose from bed and cried out, refusing to surrender. But death claimed her anyway. My grief was unbearable. I fled the city and wandered aimlessly for months. Eventually, I purchased an isolated abbey in a remote part of London. The gloomy building matched my desolate heart. I tried decorating it with bright tapestries and colorful carpets, hoping cheerfulness might return, but the colors brought no comfort. I fell into darkness and drink, a period I prefer not to discuss. Eventually, I married again. Adeline was her name, with black hair and black eyes, completely unlike Tabitha. But how could I forget my first love? I brought Adeline to live in a tower room high within the abbey. The chamber was vast, with a towering ceiling and an enormous window of stained Mexican glass. A golden chandelier hung from the center, and we furnished it with exotic pieces from distant lands. Adeline feared me. My melancholy moods kept her at a distance, which suited me well enough. My thoughts remained consumed by Tabitha resting in her grave. Sometimes at night I would call her name into the darkness, wondering if love could somehow summon the dead. 3 months after our wedding, Adeline fell ill. She complained of disturbed sleep and strange sounds echoing through the tower. I dismissed her concerns as fever dreams. When she recovered briefly, the illness returned with greater severity. The doctors were baffled. Again she spoke of mysterious noises and movements that terrified her. One winter night, she woke in panic. I sat on the sofa near her bed as she whispered about sounds and shadows, her face pale with terror. I saw and heard nothing. I told her it was merely wind moving the curtains, but she grew faint with fear. Remembering wine on a distant table, I crossed the room beneath the chandelier. As I walked, something invisible seemed to brush past me, and I glimpsed a faint shadow on the carpet, barely perceptible. I said nothing to Adeline. I poured wine and returned to her bedside, then settled on the sofa to watch over her. Soft footsteps seemed to approach across the carpet. As Adeline raised the glass to her lips, I saw 3 or 4 drops of bright crimson liquid fall into her wine. She noticed nothing and drank. I convinced myself it was imagination. Adeline's condition rapidly deteriorated. On the 4th night, she died. Her servants prepared the body and covered it with sheets. The following night, I sat alone with her remains in that vast chamber. Shadows danced around me, and I stared nervously into dark corners where curtains swayed. When I looked beneath the chandelier, I saw no shadow there, which brought brief relief. But gazing at Adeline on the bed, memories of Tabitha flooded back with overwhelming force. Near midnight, a faint sound pulled me from my thoughts. It came from the bed. I listened in dread, then examined Adeline's body for any sign of life. But nothing moved. Minutes passed before I noticed the slightest color returning to her cheeks. Horror froze me in place. I tried reviving her, but the color faded again, leaving her cold and stiff as marble. Exhausted, I collapsed on the sofa, dreaming of Tabitha. An hour later, the sound returned. I rushed to the bed and saw her lips trembling, then parting to reveal white teeth. A pink flush spread across her cheeks and neck as warmth returned to her body. She lived again. I worked desperately to revive her fully, but once more the color drained away and she grew cold. I sat down, my mind returning to Tabitha. Then a 3rd time, sounds came from the bed. Why describe the full horror of that endless night? Again and again I tried reviving Adeline, and each time some invisible force seemed to battle against her return. Each time her appearance subtly changed in ways I could not explain. Near dawn, she moved with greater strength. I sat exhausted on the sofa as her body showed clearer signs of life, even with closed eyes. But then she rose and walked slowly to the room's center as if sleepwalking. I sat paralyzed, unable to move or speak. Mad thoughts filled my head. Was this truly Adeline? I observed her black hair and eyes, but uncertainty gripped me. She seemed taller somehow. Her cheeks glowed like roses. Consumed by madness, I ran toward her, but she retreated. Then I saw her hair rippling in unfelt wind, and it was not black but rich brown. Slowly she opened her eyes. I screamed. Those eyes were not Adeline's dark ones, but the beloved brown eyes I knew so well. They were Tabitha's eyes, staring back at me from beyond death itself.